The Corps of Engineers. Engineers must be oriented and adapted to a multitude of tasks.
The Army Corps of Engineers is raising the dam by 8 meters.
U.S. Army Corps of Engineers.
The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers lays out their response plan.
We provide infrastructure assessment, temporary roofing, temporary emergency power. We help with debris assessment and removal operations. We also work with temporary housing.
And he'll tell you there's no end to the types of services the engineers provide.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Building Strong Buffalo podcast. This is the place to get to know the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Buffalo District, our people, and our stories. My name is Jess Levenson, your host and public affairs specialist with the district. So we're a few days out from March and National Women's History Month. During this observance, the Army paid tribute to the contributions of women in the building of our great nation. Only 6 years ago, women were excluded from serving fully in the Army. Now, we all know how it feels to be excluded in unique shapes and forms, as we all have distinct differences. But our fundamental needs are the same. We all want to be welcomed, valued, respected, and heard. My guest today is Judi Phillips, Equal Employment Opportunity Officer at the Buffalo District. We're very happy to have her here, as she is someone in our district who really takes care of people and knows that those values and fundamental needs are the same. So let's jump right into it. Judi, thanks for being here. How are you?
I am fine, Jess. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's rare that people want to talk to the EEO person if they don't have a complaint.
Yeah, I have no complaints, Judi. I only have compliments for you, for sure.
Jess, you're my favorite person in the world right now. Thank you for saying that.
See, it feels good to talk to Judi. So, Judi, my first question is, what is an EEO officer? What does an EEO officer do?
The EEO officer is tasked with dealing with non-discrimination and fairness in the agency. So we're sort of the watchdogs to make sure that things are carried out in the best possible manner to ensure that everybody is treated the same and equally.
Awesome. Thank you. How did you get into this career field?
You know, I probably shouldn't admit this. I had no idea what EEO was. I was working for the Department of Labor. I'll back up a minute. I was a career counselor in higher education. Somehow somebody said, this is how my early career went. Somebody said, hey, here's a job you might be interested in personnel with the federal government. So I took the position and still had no interest or desire to know what EEO was, except the civil rights officer had an office right next door to me, and he was in need of a collateral duty EEO counselor. Asked if I wanted to do it. I said sure. Still had no idea what it was. Went through training. It was not good training. I came away with not a really good, clear idea. It was more like a annual get-together of people from across several areas. It was fun. Still didn't know what I was doing. And they gave me my first counseling case to do. And I got to get out of my office and get a peek of what other people did for a living in the Department of Labor. And it was really, really interesting. So I was looking for a new position with more career growth, and I interviewed at two places. One was the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in Buffalo as an EEO investigator. And the very next day, I had an interview with the Department of Justice for an employee relations specialist. I was living in New York at the time. And I decided, in a really smart move, that whoever offered me the job first, I would take. So EEOC called 45 minutes before the Department of Justice, and that's how I wound up in the EEO field.
Wow. So it could have been different just 45 minutes away. Yeah.
Completely different. I really had no idea what I was doing. I was in my 20s. I wasn't sure what I liked, what I didn't like. It was all so interesting. And instead of really sitting down and thinking, where do I want to be in 10 years, I just thought, well, whoever calls, that's what I'll do. That's the path of least resistance, and that's what I did. And it ended up being a great move. It was really interesting to work for the EEOC and do investigations.
And before we started recording, you said you never thought you would have been doing this kind of thing. What were you thinking of, doing with your life before? And, why did this turn out to be the passion of your career, really?
It's interesting because I really liked working in human resources. I liked helping people. And it was a very positive type of a job where somebody would come with a pay issue, I'd help straighten it out. I did a little bit of training, informal training with other personnel specialists. I did some facilitations. It was a really positive type of job. And I think when you look at EEO as a whole, a large portion of my career has been spent working with individuals who are very unhappy with some type of an employment decision. So it's dealing with complaints. And I never thought that I was the sort of person that I would do well in the long term working on complaints because a lot of people, rightly so, think it's sort of a downer to deal with complaints all the time. And it's not necessarily the favorite part of my job anymore, but I do it because I feel I'm helping people. It just isn't exactly what I thought that I would be doing.
Do you have any coping strategies for when the complaints come in? Do you find relating to people in a certain way helps, or even relating to how you're feeling when you hear those things?
Yeah, actually, it's interesting and ironic that early in my career in EEO, I worked for somebody who harassed the staff, especially the females, made really egregious comments, just treated people very, very poorly. But the funny part was my very first day on the job, I came in and an investigator came over to me and said, "Hey, welcome to the job. You might want to take some notes. Just jot down anything unusual you see." And I thought, well, what is her problem? Well, I think that was her way of telling me, like, you're probably going to get harassed by the boss. And I think having to go through that experience, including an investigation because somebody filed a complaint against him, and ultimately his removal, really put me in a unique position where I do understand what people feel like when they complain they're being treated differently, where they complain they're being harassed, where they feel, it's hopeless, that there's nowhere else to go. They need to stay in, this town because their family is here. And to be able to tell them, you'll get through this, no matter what happens, it will change. We can make this more positive. Sometimes it's not EEO related. It's just perhaps a bad fit for the employee, or the supervisor maybe needs a little bit more training or guidance because they're fairly new. And I really enjoy being able to connect with somebody and just say, hang in there, we're going to get through this. It's going to be rough the first few months. Sometimes the process takes a while, but, I want to make it better. So trying to stay within the boundaries of what I can do, and if it's something that's really outside of EEO, still trying to find help for the person. I enjoy that very much, and I like being able to let people know that I understand what they're going through. I've been there.
Thank you for sharing your personal experience. I know that you're kind of the POC for that kind of support here, as well as I think Linda Lee. She's
excellent. She is, Linda Lee is wonderful at what she does, which is dealing with individuals who are going through some very high stress situations, a highly emotional situation. Sometimes it could be somebody has experienced a death, has seen something very tragic, and Linda Lee is such a wonderful resource as the CISM coordinator.
You guys do an incredible job, and I know I wish there were more people around who were able to support the fundamental human needs that go on with having hundreds of employees in an organization. So thank you so much. Judi, your programming for the district is pretty varied. You've done events that range from meditation and Tai Chi. I remember seeing the Tai Chi class probably a week after I started at the district, so it was really cool to see some of the events that we were putting on at the time. You've also spotlighted area businesses that work with refugees and ones that also prepare individuals with disabilities for culinary careers. And finally, events that put employees together with leaders from inside and outside of the federal government. What has been your favorite program that you've put on?
That is a great question. I get very nervous before a program. I want my programs to be good. I want them to connect with people. It's very hard for me to pick a favorite program. It's usually the program that I'm working on next. Whatever I'm preparing to release to the workforce Usually it's my favorite program. But if I had to pick one, for some reason, we brought in Dog Tags of Niagara for a program for Disability Awareness Month. And for some reason, I feel a strong connection with that particular program. And what I was hoping is they would bring in a dog and tell us about what the program is, which basically takes veterans in the community might be having some difficulties adjusting to civilian life, and matches them with dogs who are having problems getting adopted. And so they train dogs, they connect with dogs, they connect with other veterans, so they have their own family when they're in this program that lasts far beyond the program. The dogs find homes as a result because they're being trained, they're learning to trust, and it's a really lovely program. So we put this program together, and they called and said, hey, we can't bring any dogs. And I thought, this is going to be a disaster. Let me tell you, that program, I can't even tell you what it was like to see the commander at the time with tears in his eyes as he listened to the success stories of the program. The person who spoke is a professional photographer and had just the most heartwarming photos that he showed, and then he would talk the story behind each photo, and he brought in several of the people from Dog Tags to talk about how it had changed their lives. It was an amazing story. It was one of the first that I did in the district, and I think that, for some reason, will always be very special to me.
Wow, yeah, that's really powerful. The human-animal connection, like, I've seen that change lives. I saw this, there was a big movie with the guy who plays Captain America.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Evans.
Yeah.
He did a movie called Superhero Dogs, and these dogs were, healing people, like literally. It was amazing.
There is something. I'm a big animal fan. I did mention before I worked my way through graduate school at the Buffalo Zoo, working with elephants, tapirs, bears, and wallaroos. So I do love animals.
Now, what's a
Bees and roos, wallaroos and wallabies. It's a species differentiation. And I have 10,000 stories to talk about the zoo and Sal the wallaroo that you couldn't be alone with because he was huge and he was very adept at, you've seen it in movies where they lean back on their tail and they kick at you. So you always had to be careful when Sal was around. So, yeah, lots of good stories. I broke a couple of teeth falling off of a camel that I was riding bareback before the zoo opened to the public. So one of my absolute favorite jobs ever. But, I do like to see the effect an animal can have on a person. And that program, I think, really just drew it out.
Yeah, and that's just one of the amazing events you've put on. And I look forward to all the future ones you're putting on. So how has the pandemic impacted these kinds of programs?
Well, it's interesting. Like everybody else, I didn't know what I was going to do. It's interesting because when I began my career, it was so complaint-focused, investigating complaints, compliance-related, programs to educate on harassment and the like. But what I have grown to love about this job is the special emphasis programs and looking for programs to do in response to needs or just to bring the workforce together. And with the pandemic, I felt that I was really out of the loop. I didn't know what to do like everybody else. I was sitting at home with my computer. So initially it was trying to find resources where I tried to appeal to adult learners. Some people like to listen, so I'd look for a podcast on a topic. For people who like to watch, I'd find a YouTube video on a topic, and perhaps an article as well for those who like to read. Not exactly the most interesting emails I was sending out, but it got me through a few months. But what I have found is, like everyone, I've become much more comfortable with the virtual world, with giving training virtually, and the speakers that I will reach out to now, they're doing Zoom trainings now for the last year. So I can find speakers who know how to handle a virtual world and a virtual audience. So it's become the new normal. And for somebody who has a fear of speaking in public like I do, it's very nice now. I have no problems doing training from my desk with the laptop. I'm very comfortable doing it. I don't get the nerves that I normally do if I have to stand up in front of somebody.
How is it just in front of one person?
It's okay. I like it.
Okay.
It's a conversation. I'm much more comfortable, Jess. Thank you.
All right. So the Army has an initiative that's DEI. It stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And our armed forces are still working on those kinds of values and what it all means for the armed forces. So I want to ask you, because these terms can be a little obtuse, hard to define. I know when you mentioned when you first started in the career field and you got this training, you still didn't know what it all meant. So you can talk about a definition or simply what it means to you. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean?
Sure, that's a great question. And it used to be just diversity and inclusion, and now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion seems to be what everybody's using, DEI. Very simply put, diversity is recognizing that differences in people bring something to the table. So when we talk about differences, some people automatically go to the race card. They start talking demographics, but differences can be your experiences, your education, your race, your religion, your age. Diversity covers a lot of territory, and as diversity is gaining more attention with what is going on in society, I think that the need to look at diversity carefully also includes looking at inclusion. So diversity is recognizing and bringing together people who are different to one place, like to a workplace. Equity is really the traditional EEO. It is fairness, equitable treatment, non-discrimination, looking at non-discrimination on a global platform, almost like what are some of the best practices in other countries. So equity is what I've been doing for almost 30 years now. I hate to say that. And inclusion is the part of the equation that a lot of people overlook. They think if we are recruiting people who are diverse, that is going to fix all of our problems and we've got a good DEI program, and it's not true. So inclusion is making sure that people feel welcome, that they feel part of the team, part of the group, that they play an important role, that they are heard, and that they are allowed to be their authentic selves. They don't have to hide a part of themselves, such as sexual orientation or religion, that they can speak freely and be treated equally. So diversity and inclusion really go hand in hand. I think a lot of people believe if you increase diversity, that's going to lead to success. And no, you've got to look at inclusion from the day the employee starts the new job. How do we do when we're onboarding new employees? Are we making sure they feel welcome? Are we making sure they understand where they fit in the team? Do they feel part of the team? It's difficult in a virtual environment. It makes it more challenging, but to me it makes it more interesting as well. So you want to make sure that you always are checking in on the inclusion of employees, because your diversity is going to go straight out the window if you don't spend as much time on inclusion as you do on diversity.
So, so do you believe that companies, society has focused on the surface aspect of diversity because it's the easiest thing to visually show people, like, hey, we are diverse, but it takes more effort, it takes more nuance to include people?
Well, that's a really great question. And a fairly recent study showed that there are generational differences on how people view diversity. So boomers and Generation X view diversity in general. I don't want to stereotype, but in general, they view diversity as demographic numbers, fairness. Do we have equal numbers? While millennials and Generation Z are looking at it from a business opportunity. They're much more used to working, socially, networking virtually. And they're looking at as to how can this improve what we're doing from a business sense? How can I create an innovative team? How can we create better products? How can we offer better services working with a diverse team? So the shift in diversity, even though there has been a lot going on in the public eye, diversity has been around for years in the federal government. NASA has one of the best programs and has for years. So it's gone from the view of do the right thing, which is what it was 10 to 15 years ago, to this is a business opportunity. And I think the pandemic has shown that with more jobs opening up virtually, the sky is the limit now for professionals as to where they want to work. So how can we make sure that they want to work for us? How can we show them that we are inclusive, that we are open to diversity, we're open to teaming, we are open to doing things in a different way? not sure I answered your question. Trying to stay away a little bit from the society and what they think, and if we're just scratching at the surface and just focusing on from a business standpoint. I think that diversity is getting a lot of attention because what goes on in the news, but it has been gaining attention in the federal government for years, and I think Army realized it. And some of the events that happened this past year caused Army to finally push it out as they should have.
Mm-hmm. Have you personally felt the sting of exclusion? How did exclusion in any form shape you to be the person you are today?
I would have to say yes, and I would challenge you to identify somebody who is not at some point in their life. It could be when you're in school, feeling like you're an outcast. It can be on a job when you're the new person. So when we talk about exclusion, the family joke is that I champion for the underdog. I'm always looking for that person who is not included. Has everybody's voice been heard? And so I would basically term it as, when I look at how I have felt excluded in the past, it's probably based on gender. And I think that's not unusual, especially if you're working in agencies that are predominantly male. So it has shaped me. It's interesting. It has shaped me to make sure that everybody's voice is heard, to see that things are done fairly in meetings, that people aren't talked over, to try to get people to speak up who normally wouldn't speak up, because I just don't want anybody feeling they've been shoved to the side or their voice doesn't matter.
Yeah, thank you so much. When I interviewed a couple of our younger women employees, that was mentioned a lot, just meetings and feeling like you have the opportunity to speak and be heard in those kinds of settings.
It's interesting because, again, not to stereotype, but there are some general differences in communication styles between males and females. And one difference is females try to make sure, if they're running a meeting, that they kind of check in with everybody and make sure that everybody's on board with the direction or the choice that's being made in the meeting. And males, not so much. They might say, anybody got any ideas, any difference, everybody okay with this, and move on. So, and I've noticed it. Once I became aware of it, I do pay attention in meetings and notice it. At one point, I took a graduate class in cultural anthropology, and the class at first I didn't understand. It was basically trying to figure out who's running meetings. So it was going to various board meetings in the public sector and the private sector and trying to figure out who really had the power in the meeting, which I have remembered my entire career, that class, because it's really interesting now for me to go to meetings, and perhaps it's not the person who's called the meeting that's running the meeting, but who really is the person that everybody is listening to, that everybody, when that person speaks, everybody agrees with or doesn't even bother to argue with. I don't know if it's the same thing as agreeing with. Who really has the power in the room? Is it a female?
Yeah, I don't know.
We'll just leave it out there. Pay attention at your next meeting.
Yeah, I think all of our listeners, try that little social experiment. See, on your next meeting, your next virtual call, take a moment to observe, who's talking the most, who's getting agreed with, who's, all of these interesting power plays that may or may not be overt.
Yeah, it's interesting. Something that I hear about a lot is females feeling that their ideas are not heard in meetings. They will suggest something and it isn't really responded to, and then a male will suggest it, a few minutes later, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's a great idea." I've seen it myself, and so I'll tell females, they're like, "Well, what should I do?" I'm just say, "I already said that." I go, yeah, maybe it sounds like you're complaining, but after a while, they're going to quit trying to steal your ideas because they know you're going to speak up. Mm-hmm. So just call them out on it and keep on moving. But it happens, unintentionally, but it happens.
Yeah. Thank you for that message to stand up for one's ideas and one's value. So let's focus for a moment on some of the hard numbers and explain how a DEI program deals with some of these issues. Looking at last year's statistics for our district, out of 298 employees, 29% of those are female, compared to 47% in the overall civilian labor force. Also, of the 62 employees in the civil engineering series, 83% are males, so that's 17% female. And of those 40 individuals classified as supervisors or managers, a whopping 90% are male and 10% are female. So that's 1 out of every 10. So, couple questions. Feel free to answer them in succession or however you want. What do these numbers mean to you? Are they good, bad, appropriate, etc.?
Okay, so the numbers are not surprising since I, of course, see who's in the district and who is at meetings. Are they good? No, they're not good. Are they surprising? Well, the one positive thing I can say is that in the engineering field in this country, 16% are female. So we're up to 17% in the district if you want to celebrate something. And being a little sarcastic there because I think that our numbers can be an awful lot better. It is disturbing to me that at the upper level, it's 90% male. That's not good. And the solution is not to increase diversity at the bottom, at the introductory levels. You need to make an effort at all levels. So there are some things that we are looking into doing. For example, if there is an opening for a higher level, a higher graded position, I strongly suggest that we advertise nationally with one of the organizations that represents minorities and females. Those are the positions we should really push out and look for the most amazing candidate, and not just the easiest way of doing it and putting it into USA Jobs. I think we need to be very careful about who we're grooming in the district for the next job. As a supervisor, you have a lot of power. Perhaps who is going to be retiring or eligible to retire in upcoming years. Make sure you give everybody the opportunity to take assignments related to what that person does so that you're not grooming one individual. So when the interview comes, that person is going to get the job. So I think we really need to take a hard look about what we're doing in advance, well in advance of an opening. We have something called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Roadmap, where we're addressing demographics. We're addressing everything, actually. It's actually exciting. Here I go. So one of the things that we are doing is we are creating a larger recruitment pond. We want supervisors and managers to actively engage in recruiting for their next opening. That doesn't mean you call somebody and say, hey, can you send my vacancy announcement out? I think it's okay if we all share the wealth. The information we're happy to share with you, but try going to some schools that aren't our typical schools that we always go to. Because if you always go to the same schools, you're basically going to get somebody who looks like you, thinks like you, perhaps even had the same professors that you do. It's not exactly increasing diversity on any level. So think outside of the box. I think there are opportunities to recruit people virtually. I'm not saying that Buffalo District has any virtual openings at this point, but down the line, I think this pandemic might change the way that we are able to fill some of the jobs, I hope. But I think we need to greatly diversify where we are going to look for candidates. We are encouraging sister districts to work across district lines and to share resumes. For example, if somebody goes to a minority career fair, post those resumes so if my managers and supervisors want to look at them, they can. We're encouraging supervisors to go to the Workforce Recruitment Program list, which is a list of resumes of individuals with disabilities that they can keep in the database for up to 2 years from their date of graduation so that we can hire individuals with disabilities without competition.
Very cool.
There's a lot going on. There's just a few things. I don't want to bore you with a giant list, so I'll stop right there for the moment.
Well, I encourage you to, speak as much as you want on the topic, but I'm a non-supervisor, so I don't always know what goes into that, but they have a heavy responsibility. They're they're creating culture, they're creating new growth of the workforce. And it sounds like what's being encouraged is, get out of your comfort zone, not only professionally, but like in terms of who you're connecting with and the kinds of people that you're interacting with at different schools, at different locations, stuff like that.
That's true. It's something else that we're also doing, and we've just started experimenting with this. So I'll let you know how it goes after we've had a couple more vacancies. We've only done, I think, 3 this way, but we are redacting resumes for selection panels right now. So this is in response to the idea of unconscious bias, that somebody might look at a name or a neighborhood, because there are plenty of studies out there and cases out there where somebody was influenced by an ethnic sounding name perhaps, or perhaps if the person has a religious organization that they belong to or a political organization that they belong to. So we want to take all of that out of the selection panel members' hands. They shouldn't have to worry about that. This is also in response to employees being afraid that pre-selection is going to occur. So we want to take the names, the addresses, and the names of any organization that somebody might have some sort of a visceral reaction to, and redact them before the panel ever sees the resumes. We want the panel members to make sure that they have finalized their interview questions and their matrix for rating those resumes before they ever see a resume, so they're not influenced by one candidate or another. So everything we can do to level the playing field, including having outside of our district, outside members of the panel on GS-12 and up panels. So somebody who doesn't know the players in Buffalo, so somebody's looking at it with a fresh eye and is going to basically say, I didn't hear that, I didn't see it in the resume, so it's keeping us honest, and I like that, and I think that employees appreciate that. So that's one of the changes that we have just started to implement. And we're experimenting right now with how long does it take to redact the resumes? How quickly can we turn it around? Is it something that we can have admins do to help selection panels in each section?
What is the situation with not having a dedicated human resources department? How does that play into kind of how all of what we're talking about, this responsibilities are delegated to pretty much everyone?
Yes, and I think that's a hot button topic, but I'm going to jump right in. This is the freedom of having worked for 30 years in the federal government. This is the first agency I have worked for where it is this decentralized, I guess, human resources, or is decentralized when they are actually in the field?
Decentralized, just spread out.
Okay, so I guess this is centralized hiring that we have. I think that Human Resources has it in their contract to handle recruitment. I think it's open for interpretation, and that's where we fall into some issues. I have never seen, I've never worked anywhere where we have had to do so much. Supervisors sending out vacancy announcements to diverse groups. Every place else I've worked, I've had a good partnership with HR. Not to say anything against our HR. I like the people I work with very much in that community, but apparently it is not their job to have lists, maintain lists, and send out our vacancy announcement to some of the underrepresented populations, organizations that work with them. I think it is a heavy load for supervisors to have to do. But then again, if you only have one vacancy every 2 or 3 years, I think you can handle it. But it's burdensome to put it on a one-person EEO office to handle all of this. I mean, that's no solution either. But I do have some supervisors who think I am their solution and I should be contacting and I should be getting resumes. And guess what? No. I'm trying to be helpful here, but I think that everybody has to step up with the current situation that we have. I would like to see a dedicated person who handles recruitment. If it's just for Buffalo or if it is regionally, that we have that person who will go out to career fairs, who will, target different organizations with our vacancy announcements. And whether they are working as part of our HR or if they're working as part of our executive office, I think that is the solution. And if it's a money issue, then find a resource that can work regionally for us.
Things to think about.
Thanks for asking.
All right, so here's another statistic. Our district has met/exceeded federal goals for individuals with disabilities in the workplace. Good news. We have 7, and that's approximately 2.4% of our employees self-identifying as having a targeted disability. So what are targeted disabilities, and why is the federal government interested in them?
Okay, so great question. The federal government has been interested in increasing the number of individuals with disabilities in its hiring ranks for decades. Individuals with disabilities are severely underemployed in our country. So I think the unemployment rate in 2020 was for individuals with disabilities was twice that as for individuals without disabilities. So this is an ongoing problem that has been going on at least as far as 30 years that I've been with the federal government. It is the only population that we have an affirmative employment goal to hire. Everybody thinks there's affirmative action in the federal government to hire females, to hire minorities. It's individuals with disabilities. That's our one targeted goal, to try to eradicate the statistics that are out there. With respect to targeted disabilities, those are individuals with severe disabilities, such as somebody who's in a wheelchair, blindness, deafness, partial paralysis or full paralysis, missing extremities, traumatic brain injury. So those are the individuals that have an even more difficult time finding a job. So yes, I'm pleased that we have met the federal hiring goals of it's 2% of individuals in our workforce with targeted disabilities and 12% of individuals with just disabilities in general. And we have met that goal for 2 years, which is fantastic. However, we're such a small district. So if one person changes their self-identity on, it's called MyBiz. If they go in there and say, you know what, I'm going to change my disability from, I'm blind to, oh, look, I also have diabetes. I'm going to check the diabetes box. I can only pick one. Well, diabetes is not a targeted disability. Or if that person leaves the district, we suddenly fall below our 2%. So the business of reaching that goal is made a little bit more difficult because individuals have to self-identify in MyBiz if they have a disability. It is not a requirement. So if you decide I'm not going to go in and self-identify that I have a disability, that's my own business. It is your own business. I get a data dump every year. And that's what I'm looking at, is that data dump to see how many individuals are checking that they have targeted disabilities. I don't care who has the targeted disability. I don't have time to have a care about it. That's your business. I'm just looking at how many are checking that box. Did we meet that statistical number? But if you choose not to self-identify, my numbers will never be accurate. And I can't make you do it. It's your right.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important. I can't force anybody to update their statistics, and I would never do that, actually. And I don't want supervisors telling their employees, you need to do this. However, when employees come to me to complain about our low number of individuals with disabilities, or that's just disgusting, that's where the statistics come from. So it's kind of ironic, because even if you look nationally at the statistics, like for USACE or division-wide, it's all coming from how you self-identify in the system. So our numbers are not accurate because you can't make everybody do it because it's voluntary. So I encourage people to do it. I do understand you have a right not to do it. All I can tell you is nobody sees that information except for your EEO officer. I can't even get that information from HR if I was a supervisor. And whenever I have been asked over my 30 years to give a list of who has identified, there's just no way you're ever going to get that. I will never give that to anybody. I am not going to pull your name. I'm only going to pull that statistic. Mm-hmm. So our numbers, yeah, they're terrible. But if you're one of the people who is not going to update your information to make sure it's accurate, I don't know you're really in a position to criticize the number.
Yeah. And numbers tell a story, and we want our stories to be as accurate and reflective of reality as possible.
I do like accuracy in numbers, but again, I do understand it is the individual's right whether they put that information in or not.
Thanks for explaining that, Judi. Our demographics don't represent the demographics of our nation overall. So what's the solution to improving our demographics? And just going off that a bit more, you and my boss, Andy Karnacki, are the diversity champions for the district this year. What, if anything, are you planning on doing differently from a DEI perspective?
Well, those are really good questions. And Andy is great to work with. He has high energy, which I love. So we kind of push each other on this. So we started with the resume redactions. The next thing we want to do is move into looking at PDs. And we want to look at PDs, the diversity team, from a gendered term perspective or gendered words. So when I say gendered words, I'm not talking about the PD says he should possess, he must have this. When I'm talking about gendered words, I'm looking at words that studies have shown that females and males react differently to. So to give you an example, I love using this one in USACE in particular, hard charger. That's definitely a masculine word that appeals to men, not so much females.
I just got fired up from hearing it. So.
You're funny. So, there's certain words that appeal more to females, collaborative, teamwork. So we've got a list. I actually brought it with me because I do enjoy talking about this, alternative words that we can use. But decisive, competitive, expert, driven, independent, those are words that appeal to men in general. Again, everything I say, it's in general. Females, they're looking for, responsible, understanding, cooperative, interdependent, interpersonal, connect, committed, cooperative. Very different words. And I think that we do use some of those male words more in the way that we speak here. And we just want to look at PDs and make sure that we scrub them from some of these terms. We also want to make sure that what are in PDs really belong in a PD. So, for example, must you be a licensed engineer? Or is that simply one of those wish list items? So just really taking a hard look at several PDs every year and making sure that we take out anything that isn't truly required. If it's something that you can get, your license, for example, after you've been hired, that's fantastic. And that's actually a selling point for us to be able to say, we will pay for you to take this training. We will pay for your certifications. So if we take out some of these requirements that really don't need to be in a PD or in a vacancy announcement, we can widen the pool of applicants. Studies also show that when looking at a job announcement, that 90% or more of females reading that vacancy announcement, if they don't feel they qualify 100% for the job, they're not going to apply. Why waste your time? Whereas 60% of males are like, yeah, doing it, going to throw in my resume and see what happens. So we want to make sure that our vacancy announcements reflect the qualities or the experiences that really are needed for the job and aren't just a wish list. So that's something that we will be tackling next. Also taking a hard look at the Command Climate Survey and the FEVs, the results. What can we do differently? How can we improve it? That's going to go straight to inclusion. How do we keep people if there are problem areas? What do we need to do differently? So one area that I'm going to be looking at is harassment. So I will be doing one-on-one supervisor trainings this summer and the topic of harassment. And we did some one-on-one training. I did some one-on-one training last year in retaliation because I find that supervisors feel they can ask questions or give specific examples if there's nobody else in the room. It's just us. It's a one-on-one tutorial, and I can make sure that they understand the topic through a series of scenarios, questions, and answers, and it's interactive, kind of like your podcast.
Yes.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. These are actionable items that the district and you and Andy are championing to create a more inclusive environment.
We're certainly doing our best. We're listening to employees. I try whenever I hear there are issues or concerns to figure out a way that I can draw attention to and address that concern without giving away the identity of the person who brings the concern to me. Because if they weren't concerned with protecting their identity, they would go directly to the source or to the commander. So I try to be sensitive to the needs of people coming to me, and try to figure out ways to make the environment better whenever possible. I think the one thing Andy and I both share is a drive to do things and a drive to change things and not just kick the can or talk about things. It's like, I'm going to create something. We're going to have a list. We're going to use that list. We're going to have a training. You're going to go to that training. I mean, we really, we want change, and we don't want to wait a year or 2 years or 3 years. We're fired up, and there's some employees who are really fired up too, and we really want to make the place as good as we can possibly do it. And that includes, drum roll please, we are looking at videos. I think if you want to work in Buffalo, a lot of times you know somebody in Buffalo, you're from Buffalo. Just you weren't. I'm not quite sure how we got you. I'm glad we got you. We need to talk more about this. But we want to look into, what do we have on our website? You know, what are we showing on our website? Can we really explain what we do here at the Corps, what we do here in Buffalo, and make it an attractive place for people to want to come to Buffalo? Are we doing a good enough job? So I think that we need to, and Andy agrees, work on some of the videos, produce some videos that really show some of the movers and shakers around here. We've got some great people who have started over the last 5 years. They're fantastic. I want to hear from them. Why do they like it? Why did they come here? You know, why are they still here? And those are the people that I want to showcase in some of our videos, because graduates are going to be looking at them. You know, do they see themselves? They don't want to look at me. I'm old. I'm, 30 years. They don't want to hear me talk. They don't want to see me on video. They want to talk to somebody who's been out, within the last couple of years, who they can relate to and see themselves in that position. So I think it's very important to look at the face that we present of the district, who we are, and tell that story.
Yeah. I'm all for that, although it sounds like I'm going to have some more work.
Sorry about that.
Andy, new initiatives, videos. It's going to be podcasts and videos for me. That's what I know.
We just like to make sure you're always employed.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
We're going to wrap this up, but I just want to give the opportunity if there's anything else you want to share.
I want to thank you for the opportunity. Again, not too many people really seek out EEO to hear about them and their thoughts. I know we're oftentimes thought of as a fairly negative, nobody wants to work in that occupation. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that in the last 10 years, like, oh, you've got the worst job in the district. I don't have the worst job in the district. And I think it's working on programs like DEI and special emphasis and the ability to interact with members of our community and see employees come to programs and talk to them. I really think I have a fantastic job, actually, except for complaints. But I do have a fantastic job. And if anybody is interested in working on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we do have a pool of volunteers to draw from. So I don't want anybody to think like I don't really know very much about it. You can work on different parts if you want to. If you're interested in working on gendered terms, if you're interested in helping to create some training videos this summer, please, contact myself or Andy or Lavette Durham, and we'll get you going. The more people that we can get involved and the more people with different ideas and perspectives, the better for all of us. So thank you, Jess.
Thank you, Judi. The only complaint that I have for you is that you're not on this podcast enough, and I don't see you anymore.
I know. It's so nice when I come to the office so that I can actually see people. And again, I'm a huge introvert. So for me to be like, Jess, oh my God, it's so funny. Some people I haven't seen in a year. I love it. So it is fantastic being in the same room with you and talking to you and having a real conversation with somebody.
100%. I agree. Thank you, Judi, so much for being here, being on the Building Strong Buffalo podcast, and sharing yourself with the world. We're living, working, and engineering in a time of tremendous change. And as always, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is adapting and innovating to deliver engineering solutions to our nation's toughest challenges. If you want to learn more about the Buffalo District, check out the description for our website and social media pages. We'll be uploading new episodes of the podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. So check your apps. Thanks for listening, and essay ons!